You've been handling a very interesting case surrounding a Seattle pastor who was arrested a couple of years back for reading the Bible in public. He has now been vindicated. Can you tell us a little bit about this story?
I can. It's really a fitting end to an outrageous situation, Billy. What had happened was is the city of Seattle effectively made reading the Bible aloud a crime. And it first occurred on June 24, 2022. I don't know if that date sticks out to you, but that was the date that the U.S. Supreme Court rendered the Dobbs decision. That was a decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. So that there was this huge rally protest going on in downtown Seattle. And Pastor Meineke thought this would be a perfect opportunity to share the gospel. So he took his Bible and he goes out there to read the Bible. He has very earnest pro-life beliefs, but that was not his purpose. He really just wanted to share the gospel. So he turned to the book of John, chapter 1, verse 1, and started reading. But it was not received well. Some protesters started to crowd in around him, started saying some inflammatory, derogatory things, made him feel uncomfortable. So he moved off. He didn't want a conflict, so he moved off a few feet away to a new spot. But then at that spot, some protester grabbed his Bible and started ripping the pages out of it right in front of him. Undeterred, Pastor Meineke retrieved a second Bible and just resumed his reading. And he was able to do that for a while. But that's when Antifa members got involved and they became physical. They started to pick up Pastor Meineke. He tried to grab a nearby sawhorse to keep them from doing that. But they picked up him and the sawhorse, walked over about a block and a half away, and then just dropped Pastor Meineke on the concrete.
Was he fighting back during this at all? I mean, what was he doing while they're picking him up and literally carrying him blocks away?
He really did not want to interact with them. He was trying to avoid any type of physical altercation. So he tried to grab the sawhorse. He tried to do what he could do. But once they started picking up, he just went with it, and they dropped him. It hurt, as you would expect. It was on concrete. But he started brushing himself off. And at that point, he was thinking, well, maybe I should go home. But he was convicted to stay. So he found another spot and he started reading the book of John again. But regrettably, some other protesters came up and one knocked him down. Another grabbed his shoe for some reason. They just grabbed his shoe. And then finally, after all those things, the police arrived. They were in the vicinity the whole time, but they didn't intercede until this point. And this is where it becomes the most disappointing. The police did not come to help Pastor Meineke. Rather, they told him he was the problem. And so at that point, they said, you have to leave. You have to leave the area. You can no longer speak with people. And Pastor Meineke just knew he had a First Amendment right to share his views. And so he wasn't just willing to walk away. He tried to reason with the police officers, but they arrested him. And they held him for several hours in a detaining cell until after the abortion rally had ended.
Can I interject for a second to ask a question? Because part of this that sounds very disturbing to me, outside of the free speech part of this, which we'll talk about religious liberty, you had other people physically grabbing a Bible, ripping pages out of it, picking him up, carrying him, dropping him. That would be violence, essentially, in all of those instances, and physical contact. Were any of those people arrested, held accountable, or even talked to by the authorities, as far as you know?
They were not. And that was really disturbing, that all these things happened in front of police officers. And apparently they just let it go because, to our knowledge, no one was even addressed. Certainly no one was arrested. And it's because the police officers, pursuant to their policy, figured that it was Pastor Meineke that was the problem. And so because of that stance, they only addressed him and him alone.
What was their rationale for arresting him? I mean, on what charge were they essentially holding him?
They had a policy in place based on a law of obstructing a police officer, And what they based it on is they had this policy that if someone is speaking and there is a hostile reaction to it, then they will ask the speaker to leave or to stop the activity. And if they do not, then the police officer will ask that person to move. They were focusing in on a speaker who is really doing nothing wrong. And here with Pastor Meineke doing nothing but reading the Bible. And what we found out was actually this wasn't just an isolated determination by police officers. This was actually part of an overall policy of the police force, because 2 days later at the Seattle Center, which is a public park that's located in downtown Seattle, uh, Pastor Meineke had previously planned to go there as well because the annual Pride Fest was happening that day. There again, he wasn't really planning on getting into two issues. His purpose was to share the gospel. And in the same way, he just read the Bible. And in the same way, he encountered some similar type adverse reactions. It wasn't near as hostile as the pro-abortion group, but still he encountered some things. Some people were doing some inappropriate things in front of him. Some individuals squirted water on him. The police arrived. And what he discovered was that for the same thing as they mentioned 2 days earlier, is that they figured he was the problem and that he had to go. And when he resisted, that's when he was arrested again.
Yeah, it's essentially the heckler's veto, right? They don't want him there. He has to go. He's not welcome there, which totally disregards, in the way you're describing it, his free speech rights, religious liberty rights.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a heckler's veto, which essentially it means exactly the way it sounds. Is that you cannot allow the heckler of a speech to be able to censor or shut down that speech. It's a doctrine that has long been recognized by the U.S. Supreme Court, and regrettably, it was just not recognized by the Seattle Police Department. And so we brought suit, and regrettably, we lost at the district court level. The district judge ruled against us. We brought a motion for a preliminary injunction, basically asking the court for relief because Pastor Meineke wanted to go out again. He has this burden to share the gospel, and he really was wanting relief as soon as possible. That was denied. So he took that ruling to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And before a three-judge panel, it was unanimous. They reversed the court below. They held exactly the way you described it. They said this is a heckler's veto. It's unconstitutional, and said that, and they gave instructions to the district court to give him the preliminary injunction he was seeking. So that really then left, okay, what do we do with the remainder of the case? And the city at that point saw the writing on the wall. The Ninth Circuit had ruled. They held this as a heckler's veto. And at that point, we're able to enter into a consent order, which gave not just preliminary relief, but permanent relief for Pastor Meineke so that he can go back to the streets of Seattle and share the good news.
During this time from 2022 until 2024, when this was resolved, was he able to go out and preach at all, or did he pull back from doing that because of the arrest that he had faced?
Well, I think he had intentions on holding back. He really did, but he just couldn't really help himself because he really wants to go out there and share the gospel. So, and he actually encountered a third arrest for reading the Bible while the case was ongoing. But once we obtained the preliminary injunctive relief, then Pastor Meineke was let alone. He's able to go out, share the gospel, and again, just purely reading the Bible.
Well, I want to thank you for breaking this story down. It's definitely an important one whenever there's a free speech battle, particularly a religious liberty one like this. So I appreciate your time today.